with Google's Google India event, a slew of announcements, but most importantly, what stood out is that Google Pixel will now be made in India after
Absolutely.
Apple.
So I think the party which was thus far restricted to the other big boys in the smartphone manufacturing ecosystem, which included Apple and it included Samsung. Apple, of course, being one of the largest companies in the US, and the iPhone 15, also two models of that getting assembled in India, was obviously, breaking all headlines over the last couple of weeks. Now you've got, in addition to Samsung and Apple, which command a large chunk of India's smartphone manufacturing, you've got Google making its foray. And Google Pixel 8, of course, is going to be a new introduction from Google's stable. But I think, remember that Pixel has not been as successful a series for Google. And Google's overall smartphone ambitions, smartphone plans have not been able to compete in a very, very competitive market, which has the likes of Samsung and Apple already in the market. So I think more importantly than the fact that this is another smartphone brand being made in India, and the fact that there is, further sort of bolstering of smartphone production here in the country, I think it is a great statement of confidence from a company as large as Google, saying that it is committed to India, saying that it is looking at the government's policy on smartphone manufacturing in India far more seriously. And it shows a vote of confidence that China Plus One is actually kicking in. And the smartphone battle is not going to be fought of making in India only between Apple and Samsung. And Google renews its interest perhaps in the Pixel, looking at cost competitiveness, looking at overall manufacturing prowess that India is willing to offer and the ecosystem that India is building. Google definitely betting big on that. We don't know just yet what is going to be the quantum of that investment. What we do know is that 2024 is when the Google Pixel 8, the made in India Google Pixel 8, is actually going to roll out.
All right, and not just Google Pixel 8, a slew of other announcements, a DG Kavach for people who want to be safe on internet, stay away from scams, as well as Google Chromebook, which will be made in India.
So Google Chromebook, I think, the announcement had come a couple of weeks earlier. I think it's just finalization of that deal. So Chromebook is being made by Google in association with HP. HP, if you remember, has also been one of the 40 applicants who had applied for India's hardware PLI scheme. That list, we just don't know as yet how many of the companies which had applied are going to be eligible and will eventually receive that grant from Government of India. But Google's plan in association with HP to make Chromebook is something that got formalized again yesterday. And I think Digi Kavach is something that the country definitely needs. And we've seen the kind of innovations in scams. We've seen the kind of innovations that fraudsters are doing when it comes to siphoning off money, and devices being vulnerable, open to hacking is something that I think a closed ecosystem and far more stringent rules and regulations need to come in. But also remember that all this is in addition to Google's large cloud services, which it offers when it comes to data storage, when it comes to access of data, CDN networks, etc., that OTT platforms use. All of that already are big sort of, businesses of Google in India. I think this very, very clear shift to manufacturing in India, the hardware part of Google's business, not just the cloud, not just the software, not just the internet-driven services, but this entire push on hardware, on manufacturing, both laptops as well as smartphones, comes more as a vote of confidence than really, as I see it, making a dent to Google's overall smartphone category.
All right, so more confidence in India's ability to be a manufacturing powerhouse, and obviously Google hoping to take a share of that pie. But moving on to another company that is in fact eyeing a bigger share of the pie, Reliance. Reliance is hoping to foray into semiconductor business through Tower Semiconductors, which is based out of Israel. Will the war have an impact on that acquisition? What are the plans? How advanced are they?
So, just a little disclaimer here, Shweta, this story came in Business Today yesterday. We haven't been able to verify independently, nor have any of the agencies carried this story. But from what I understand, which was written in the Business Today story, is that Reliance is looking at acquiring some stake, perhaps if not all of it, definitely some stake in Tower Semiconductors, Israel-based company. the 7th largest semiconductor manufacturing in the world, and the semiconductor fabs that it manufactures has application usage in healthcare, in aerospace, and as well as in in devices. Now, what devices, smartphones, laptops, etc., I think would be an obvious fit for Reliance Industries. Now, also remember last year Tower Semiconductors was in talks with Intel. Intel had pledged to invest as much as $5.4 billion to acquire Tower Semiconductors, and it never got regulatory clearances, and earlier this year those plans got scuttled. Now you've got Reliance seemingly entering that fray, and a very, very obvious case for Reliance, because the kind of push that the government is making into semiconductor manufacturing in India, the kind of R&D that will be required, and the exchange of knowledge that will have to be required, because semiconductors is a very nascent industry for India. 76,000 crore rupees of investments, investment related schemes by government of India up for grabs. We've seen big names like Vedanta, like Foxconn, Foxconn at one point before they split apart, but Vedanta independently, Foxconn independently, Tata Group independently, eyeing this semiconductor business. Now, Reliance, as we know it, enters any game to disrupt it. And I think the obvious fitment with the Jio ecosystem, the obvious fitment with 5G, the obvious fitment with devices that Jio is going to launch will make a very, very strong and compelling case for Reliance to get into the semiconductor business.
One of the few businesses that Reliance hasn't forayed into.
Yet.
and that plans are now afoot from what appears to be in media. But a $5.4 billion valuation for Tower Semiconductors, if that is what the proposal was, Reliance will have to shelve that much money.
It depends, because, you know, I think the game is very different today. I think earlier you'd asked me about the impact of war. I think
you think the valuation of the company would be brought down?
There is a possibility. There is a possibility, because I wouldn't dare to call it a distressed sale, but I think Israel understands fairly well right now, and any organization, any company based in Israel would understand that the country risk right now is very high. And country risk is something, political risk, country risk is a major economic risk which is calculated anytime any deals are struck overseas or domestically. So for any company to do business in a country that has high country risk or high political risk, even though the pure economic policies enable that business to do well, there is a possibility of those businesses wanting to either get a handsome exit or an early exit, or find partners who can absorb the risks while also reap the dividends of what they have to offer.
Or maybe hopefully wait for situation to normalize in Israel.
Absolutely, but nobody knows yet how long that could take. And the overall trade, the shifting of the balance of trade for Israel and the impact of the war on this shift of balance of trade, I think these are early days, and it's difficult for anybody to very, very accurately pinpoint on which side is really going to tilt. So if Tower Semiconductors wants to expand and wants to look at being acquired, at least partly, if not fully, I think the time is fairly opportune right now, and it may be a good idea not to wait for tensions to escalate further and at least sign an MOU, if nothing else. So at least an MOU announcement, if that comes, there is some sort of a price negotiation or a letter of intent that, yes, expression of intent that, yes, we are keen to do business with Reliance or with any other partner. I think that should further, clarify the messaging that companies in Israel right now want to do.
All right, but from what we know so far, Tower Semiconductors is in apparently conversations with Reliance. So Reliance is in conversation with Tower Semiconductors to, in fact, acquire a stake in semiconductor based out of Israel. The company is based out of Israel, may not have everything going right for it just as yet, but that, of course, is the story we continue to track. But also coming back to India, the impact of all sort of macroeconomic policy tightening so far, and how could it have an after impact on Indian economy? RBI came out with its monthly bulletin reinstating that economy in fact is going on the right track, and the policy tightening, perhaps we could see some easing out in the next year or so?
So I think, had RBI's bulletin been released before the 6th of October, the 7th of October, in fact, I'm sorry, when Israel and Hamas went at war and Hamas strikes on Israel happened, I think the tone of the State of the Economy bulletin might have been a little more optimistic. It is still fairly optimistic. It is still fairly optimistic to a point that we've seen inflation data coming under check. I think 5.02% very, very comfortably in the overall comfort zone of RBI, which wants to hammer it down to about 4%, but retail inflation at 5.2%. RBI mentions in its bulletin as well that from the peak of 7.4% in July, it seems like we are far more comfortable with inflation numbers than we were earlier. Other macroeconomic data that RBI has touched upon includes unemployment rate falling from 8.1% in the month of August to 7.1% in the month of September. So there is some sort of buoyancy when it comes to employment as well. Consumption activity is high. PMI indication is good. So overall, I think the bulletin very clearly mentions that India, and reiterating what IMF and other global agencies, multilateral banks have said, that overall India is in a very, very good position, the fastest growing major economy, and that's nothing new. There is, however, a little bit of risk mentioned in the article called State of the Economy as well. And those risks, and now getting compounded with the ongoing war, US Treasury yields at record highs is something that is going to pull out capital from India.
Okay.
India's capital markets could take some sort of a beating on account of that. We've seen little shoots of that happening already when we look at markets every morning. So US Treasury yields, rising crude prices are obviously big risks to India's rupee at the moment. Now, a weakening India rupee makes imports for India that much more expensive, and more expensive imports means higher inflation. So overall, when you look at the scenario post 7th of October, India is perhaps not as confident, as comfortable as it was pre 7th of October. So I think this entire game will have to be played out on crude, on US Treasury yields, and we'll have to see what is the kind of pull out from Indian markets from INR, and what is the kind of sell-off that of Forex that RBI will have to continue doing. Remember, it's already sold about $3.8 billion worth of US dollars to keep the rupee a little bit on point, but still, I think rupee opened about 5 paisa dearer this morning. So devalued this morning. So I think 83 levels is something India is okay with. Anything higher than that will make imports expensive, and expensive imports, higher inflation, rate cut doesn't seem to be on the anvil.
All right. So a lot of signs of danger to look out for, but RBI's monthly bulletin pointing towards a better state of affairs as far as India's growth story is concerned. But moving to a specific company, Tata Neu, hoping to come out with a super app and putting in more money, $1 billion worth, to make Tata Neu a super app. What's a super app to begin with?
Oh, that's a $1 million question, Shweta.
Absolutely.
Because, I think
and what would this investment entail?
Right. So a lot of players have tried to create super apps. I think Paytm was among the first, which said that it's a super app. You can do transactions here, you can do shopping here, you can pay your bills, you can do you can do cash transfers, you can do anything, pay your toll bills and your electricity bills. So super app is basically an app that gives you a lot of functionalities.
Does it all?
Multiple apps folded into one.
Okay.
But unfortunately, in India thus far, and even in the US and the West, no app has really been able to claim this position of being a super app.
X is trying to be a super
X
app.
is trying to do that. Baidu in China has claimed to be a super app. I haven't used that app, so I don't know how super that really is.
Right.
But overall, I think Tata Neu also sort of consolidated all its multiple different apps into this one Tata Neu to become a super app. But given the festive sales that we've seen, given the kind of success that we've seen on both Flipkart and Amazon when it came to the shopping season, and Tata Neu not as versatile or not as deeply penetrated as other shopping apps or other payment apps, including Paytm, Google Pay, etc. I think Tata Neu wants to give it this one final push and wants to invest $1 billion.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but hey, if Tata can't do it, who can do it? So
Absolutely.
I think $1 billion worth of investments again into Tata Neu to really give it that one last push and try and create India's first super app. Which side that's going to go, we really don't know right now.
All right, but a competition there to create India's super app. Will Tata do it? We don't know. We'll keep a close eye on. But before we move on, a story that we I also want to quickly first, before we move on, want to talk about other companies that are also in fray apart from Tata. So Reliance has done it, or at least tried to do it. Jio has done it.
Reliance Jio, I think, is the same.
Reliance Jio. And Paytm has tried doing it, but
Paytm
failed at it.
Fairly successfully. I think Paytm had a far better traction or far better sort of recognition as a super app than any other player, because
but it failed
had
at
payment services, it had bill payments, it had shopping, it had wallet, it had movie bookings, food delivery, a lot of stuff built in.
But from Paytm's experience, can we now say it wasn't viable?
Paytm had to shut down Paytm Mall, which was a shopping business. So obviously, it's not as super as it would have wanted it to be.
Right. All right. So of course, a lot of companies, they're trying to create India's first super app. And before we end this bulletin, it appears like bank transfer rules for Indians is going to get easier. You'll be able to transfer up to 5 lakh rupees without actually having the bank account number of receiver. How does it work out?
So Shweta, I think NPCI is still working on this, and these are preliminary reports which are coming in. I believe you would still perhaps need the bank account number and the phone number of the person you want to transfer up to 5 lakh rupees to. However, what you may not need is the IFSC code of the bank, and that becomes a little glitch every time you want to transfer money, because you may have the, any account holder would be able to get the account number and you have the phone number, so it's easy to make that transaction. Anytime there's an IFSC code involved, you're looking through these multiple codes all through. And
so you don't need a bank account number?
I think you would perhaps still need. You don't need the
You
bank
don't
account
need
number.
the bank account number. You don't need the IFSC number.
You just need the phone number.
You just need the phone
Up to
number
5 lakh
and
rupees.
the bank name, the name of the bank in which you have your account.
Just the name of the bank. Now that's interesting. But my only fear, a little bit of caution, tread carefully, because I feel it's easy to have accidental transfers.
Absolutely.
And a zero too many could really dent your bank balance. But I think as long as certain safeguards are put in place, and certain multiple times entering your password and rechecking the details before you hit the confirm button should enable fewer cases of accidentally transferring more money than you wanted to.
It's going to frighten a lot of people who are very careful about transferring money, who potentially use the need to put in a bank account number and an IFSC code as a measure to protect themselves as opposed to a hassle.
Right.
A lot of people view it as hassle, or a lot of people view it as a measure to protect your own money. But NPCI therefore making it easier for people, or in calling it hassle-free transfer in the way of 5 lakh rupees. That's a big number, 5 lakh rupee transfer without the need for an account number as well as the IFSC code. But with that, we seem to have run out of time on the show. Thank you very much for watching.
With all this gear, you must be wondering if I'm climbing a mountain. Well, let me give you a wider look of this place.